Welcome to session 2 in this Windows Server 2022 video series, and in this session I'm going to show you how to install and configure the Active Directory Domain Services role in Microsoft Windows Server 2022. Now don't forget, if you find the video helpful, help the video by giving it a like, share it and subscribe for new content. So let's get started. Active Directory Domain Services is a technology that enables us to build and centrally manage a scalable Microsoft enterprise network. And it's also a good example of a client-server network model. Now, if you're new to Active Directory Domain Services, you might want to take a look at my video, Active Directory Domain Services for Beginners, and I'll leave the link below in the description. Here's an overview of the lab. We're going to install a totally new instance of Active Directory Domain Services. We're going to add a new forest, which is the overall container for Active Directory Domain Services and all of its objects. We'll create the first domain in the forest, which is known as the forest root domain. And we must give that a fully qualified domain name. And I'm going to use the domain name training.ittaster.com, but we'll talk more about that in the video. Now, DNS will also be installed because we must have a Microsoft Active Directory integrated DNS server. And after we've successfully installed and configured Active Directory Domain Services, the server will become what is known as a domain controller, or DC for short. So let's go over to the lab and get started. So let's begin by logging into the server. We'll just wait for Server Manager to refresh. Now I can see there's a problem under services, so let's just quickly take a look at that. I can see that the clipboard user service is set to automatic delayed start. So it will start eventually, but I'm going to speed that up by right clicking it and choose Start Services. There we go, everything's nice and tidy, nice and green. So next thing I'm going to do is go to local server just to review my config. Now, this is something that I set up in the last video where I showed you how to install Windows Server 2022 and perform some initial configuration. We configured a server hostname, server 1, and a static IP address of 192.168.1.101. Now, it's really important to configure things like the computer name and a static IP address before adding things like roles and features, because if you change them later on, it can cause issues further on down the line. So it's a good idea to get this done first. The other thing just to notice is that you can see here it says work group, and our server is part of a work group. That means it's either a standalone server or part of a peer-to-peer network. And this is something that will change after we've installed Active Directory Domain Services and made this server a domain controller. So let's go ahead, let's install Active Directory Domain Services. To do that, I need to click Manage, Add Roles and Features. Click Next on the first screen of the wizard. Role-based or feature-based installation. Now, Server Manager is designed to manage multiple servers. I only have the one server in my pool, Server 1, which is already highlighted, so I just need to click Next. I now need to select the role that I want to install. Now, if you are working with multiple servers, it's a good idea just to take a look up in the right-hand corner and just make sure the destination server is the correct server. Now, we want to install the Active Directory Domain Services role, so I'm going to check that. Add additional features. Click Next. Next again. This screen can be quite useful because it gives you a little overview of what Active Directory Domain Services does and a couple of useful tips. One of those is to help ensure that users can still log on to the network in case of a server outage, install a minimum of 2 domain controllers for a domain, which is good advice. And it also tells us that Active Directory Domain Services requires a DNS server to be installed on the network. This is a Microsoft Active Directory integrated DNS server, and this will happen as part of this process. Also, there's a little bit of information if you care to look at it, Microsoft Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud technology. Click Next. Now my server is a lab server, it's just in my testing and evaluation lab, so I'm quite happy if it wants to restart automatically. So I'm going to put a tick in the box and confirm that. Now we can export the configuration settings if we want to help automate this process if we're working with other servers. And click install. Now this process is going to take a little while, so I'm going to leave it to run through, and then we'll come back to the video once it's complete and carry on with the configuration. The installation has succeeded on server 1 and configuration is now required. So the next thing to do is click promote this server to a domain controller. Now this is a brand new instance of Active Directory domain services, so I'm going to choose Add Forest. Think of the forest as an overall container for Active Directory domain services, and I need to create the first domain within the forest, which is known as the forest root domain, and give it a name which must be a fully qualified domain name. Now, one suggested method is to use a subdomain of a public registered domain name, which in my case could be something like training.ittaster.com. ittaster.com is my public registered domain name, and I've chosen a subdomain of training. Now, I just want to quickly show you something else. Now you may see something like this, domain names ending in .local. Now .local is an unofficial top-level domain name, which is not supported by internet standards. Now unofficial domain names should only really be used in the test lab. It's best to avoid using them in production environments because they can cause issues with things like certificates. But if you don't have your own public registered domain name and you are just working in a test lab, it's okay to use this sort of thing. But I'm going to follow the suggested method that I showed you earlier, and I'm going to stick with training.ittaster.com and click next. Here I need to specify forest and domain functional levels. Now functional levels determine Active Directory domain services forest and domain capabilities, and they also determine which operating systems can be run on domain controllers. Now the forest functional level affects all domains and all domain controllers in the forest. The domain functional level affects the domain and domain controllers in that domain. Now the domain functional level can be set to a value higher than the forest functional level, but not lower. So for example, the current forest functional level is Windows Server 2016, which means all domain controllers within the forest must have Windows Server 2016 operating system or higher. Now ideally, forest and domain functional levels should be set at the highest value your environment can support. But be extremely careful. Do your homework first, because setting the wrong values will create serious issues. Now I'm working in the test lab, so I'm going to keep my forest and domain functional levels set at the highest value, which is Windows Server 2016. Windows Server 2016 is the highest value we can choose because there have been no significant changes since Windows Server 2016. Now I need to specify domain controller capabilities. I must have a Microsoft Active Directory integrated DNS server and also a global catalog server, which is grayed out and selected by default. And I also need to specify a directory services restore mode password. And this is in case I have any problems, need to perform any maintenance or recovery of the Active Directory domain services database. And click next. Now we do get a warning here saying a delegation for this DNS server cannot be created. Now this is because we don't have one, so it's fine to ignore this and click next. Now the wizard is just verifying NetBIOS domain name to assign to the domain, so we just leave that to run for a couple of seconds. And we can see my NetBIOS domain name is training. So I just need to click next. I now need to specify the location of the Active Directory Domain Services database, log files and sysvol folders. I'm okay with the default, so I'm going to leave those as they are and carry on and click next. Now we get the opportunity to review our selections here. I'm going to click next to proceed. And the wizard is now performing a prerequisites check. And we can see all prerequisites checks have passed successfully, so we're okay to click install and begin the installation. Now the installation is going to take a little while, so I'm going to leave this to run through and then we'll come back to the video once this is complete. The installation is complete, the server has restarted, but notice I'm now logging on as the training domain administrator. Just wait for Server Manager to refresh. And notice we have some new tiles. We have an Active Directory Domain Services tile and also a DNS tile. Now if I go to Local Server, we can see that our work group has now changed to a domain, training.ittaster.com. Now if I go to Tools, I have a number of tools that enable me to manage Active Directory Domain Services. And I'm going to click on Active Directory Users and Computers. This is a very important tool that we use to administer the server. And if I expand the domain, training.ittaster.com, and also if I go into the domain controllers container, you can see that our server 1, is now a member of the domain controllers container because it's a domain controller. So there we go, we've successfully installed and configured Active Directory Domain Services, and our server is now a domain controller. So we're now ready to move on and learn some more cool stuff in the next session. Well, I hope you did find the video helpful. If you did, please give it a like, share it and subscribe for new content, and by all means leave a comment below. Well, that brings us to the end of the video, so as always, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.